Washington is moving Jayden Daniels under center, and that single change turns this backfield into a three-headed problem. Bill Croskey-Merritt sets the tone, Rachaad White is the passing down weapon, and Kaytron Allen is the closer. And in today's video, we're going to get into how Blough's run game actually works. Okay, everyone, welcome back to Asia's Analysis, and we're back to our usual setup here. So we've had some different types of content here of late, just to kind of like mix it up a little bit. So just some housekeeping because a few people have like been worried that I stopped making videos. No, I'm still making videos. I'm just like branching out. So I have done my very first live stream. I did that last week. So if you can check that out, I did that with Rio from Rambling with Rio. I've been doing some collabs. So I went over to the Off the Bench podcast to do the debate style, the Commanders Clash Classic. I do believe that's what it's called. So go check that out. I also did a collab with her where we talked about the different schemes. And then I participated in the summer series episode 2 with Louis T over on his podcast. So I've been really, really busy, y'all. So just stay tapped into the community posts because I usually, when I switch it up and I'm doing something different, or I try to keep you guys informed of all the things I'm doing. So we are the channel is growing, and so there's a demand for me to do a lot of collabs and a lot of different things. So we're going to be mixing it up a little bit and trying to diversify the offerings and offer more than just my like breakdown videos. So if you don't see me post something, it's usually because I'm busy or I'm on a collab, and hopefully you guys are like follow me to wherever I go. So yeah, but again, thanks everyone for the support. I would never just abandon the channel. So I would let you guys know if I ever decide to stop making videos. So today we are going to start to get into this offensive series. It's going to be a little different than the defensive series, primarily because offense is a little different than defense in terms of like it was easier for me to do the defense the way I did it because I had a confirmed install. So I knew what the actual infrastructure and architecture of that defense looked like. It was confirmed to be like the Vikings. The offense is a little different. It's all concept based. So it's David Blough incorporating a lot of different ideas and concepts. So I've needed some time to get through OTAs and the mini camp and just to kind of compile information from a lot of different places to get an idea of what this is going to look like. And I feel like I have a good handle to start to get into this offensive series. So ironically, we are going to start this series off with the run game because while everyone is so obsessed with the wide receiver room, talking about we need to go out and get Ayuk, we need to go get Diggs, the identity of this offense is going to be run first. And it is very important that we understand why the run game is essentially getting that off the ground and running and having that to be the foundation is essential for the pass game. So I think with Kliff's scheme, we saw a lot of things not being married or integrated, right? So with Blough's scheme, we're going to see the run game and pass game married together, right? So the run game is going to help us generate explosives. So the play action and boot is a big part of that, right? So we're definitely going to, and let me pull this up so we can start to get into this. And so why the change? So we spent the last 2 years, kind of building the offense around Jayden in the shotgun. It was a spread RPO heavy air raid and fluid system under Kliff Kingsbury. So a lot of that really leaned on Jayden's processing and reading things and him using his legs. I do get irritated sometimes when I hear people talk about our quarterback having a lack of pocket presence without them truly understanding the X's and O's of how the scheme worked, and that this scheme was predicated on him using his legs. The scheme called for him to run around and scramble and do a lot of the things that he was doing. And that's why they chose to move on from Kliff and go to the more under-centered offense that we're doing with David Blough, because while they do want to still take advantage of him as a dual threat quarterback, there's a very clear difference between a quarterback using his legs in under center play action versus a RPO quarterback that is literally like the lead runner, right? Jayden was treated like the running back in Kliff's scheme, and that was very intentionally designed. And so, I sit here and I do all the research. So I'm not going to argue with anybody about that. I know people know that I don't see it for Kliff, but everybody knows that Kliff's system required you to evolve. And we're going to get into it a little bit so you can better understand why. But on the national level, I very rarely heard people talk about Kliff's scheme as kind of being the issue. Mina Kimes last year touched on it a little bit, and I thought she was being a hater and was hating on Jayden. And I think she was speaking more towards the actual scheme and the play style, not necessarily as the quarterback being a running quarterback, but eventually you guys in this scheme are going to have to move on from this style of play because he can't sustain it, right? And when she was talking about that all the first year, I was like, dog, thank you. I decided I didn't like Mina talking about my team. But a lot of what she was saying kind of showed up in the second year under Kliff last year, where we saw him getting exposed. And she was trying to point that out, in that the play style and the Kliff scheme exposes the quarterback and he's taking too many hits. And I think a lot of people saw it as he's scrambling because he doesn't have a good offensive line. No, he's scrambling because that is the read for him. Like it, and we'll get into that. Like it called for him to either, depending on what he was looking at, pull it down and run, or keep it and throw, right? Or hand it off to the running back, right? So if he's the read, if he's reading it to himself in the actual scheme, when you see him running around or scrambling out of the pocket, that was the design play, right? So we're going to today kind of look at the two systems and kind of deep dive that a little bit so we can better understand why we are making this move to under center, and why it is very important for us to understand that the run game is very important, or is the foundation here to ensure that we have an explosive passing attack. So what we are wanting to do is to balance the attack a little bit more than last year, and to play more power football, And so this strategically is going to help do two things. It's going to help create more explosive, so raise the ceiling of the passing game, and actually protect the quarterback by keeping him under center and having those design plays happen more behind the line, but behind the protection, as opposed to him being the lead runner in the scheme. So let's kind of get into this and take a look and deep dive here. Okay, so why the run game comes first, right? So talking about the Kingsbury era, and it being shotgun first. So it's an RPO heavy attack built around Jayden Daniels in the gun. And we all know, like, I need people to understand, because I have people kind of going, the shotgun is never going to go away. And I don't think anybody is expecting that. I don't think that's what I've been preaching here. It shouldn't be run at a 90% clip though, right? So RPO is still going to be part of what they do. It just won't be as high at as higher percentage as it was in the Kingsbury era. So it's an RPO heavy attack built around Daniels in the gun. The run game leaned on and then abandoned at key moments. And so we're going to see why the spread offense, it seemed like at times we went away from the run, and a lot of that has to do with the design of the run game and how the spread formation does not allow for you to kind of like get those short kind of hard yards and how the blocking works. So we'll talk about that a little bit, especially when you get into the red zone. It seemed like we would get into the red zone and abandon it, and a lot of that has to do with how the spread offense works. The amount of play calls that you can execute on in a spread offense when you don't have as much grass to work with. So when you start to get into the red zone area, it really Kliff's playbook became even more limited because of that. So in the new system, it's going to be more under center. So it's going to be an aggressive, balanced attack. So it's going to be run first, and it's going to be run first because the run game and the passing attack is going to be better married or integrated together. So the run is going to set up the play action and help to protect Jayden, and it's going to help kind of create explosives by putting more defenders into conflict, especially the linebackers. So we'll get into that later. So it's going to, and this is some of the things I've compiled from OTA's quotes and things like that from the offensive coordinator. So it is going to serve to open up some different schemes in the run game and different play actions and keepers, which is something that you just cannot do in the RPO scheme. And then one of the things I found that Bill said was that his vision, it just is going to help with his vision. So as a running back, you can see things before they happen. It's better than being in the gun. And so that's just for Bill, which is interesting because I thought Bill had very good vision. And I can't believe he was able to accomplish what he did accomplish in a scheme that he felt like as a running back did not do anything to help him much. He got 800 yards being phased out by Kliff and running in a scheme that did not lean to what he did best, which was the outside zone, right? So this is going to be outside zone heavy. And then also we just built the foundation and we're continuing to build off of it. So understanding that getting the run game kind of like install and establish allows for them to build the passing game off of it. And I think a lot of people think like we're installing the Ben Johnson offense. We're not installing the Ben Johnson offense. We are using Ben Johnson concepts. And I need people to understand that when it comes to the passing game, that's more KOC and his flood concept. So a lot of what Ben Johnson is known for is actually the run game stuff and the stuff he does with the run game and the running backs and setting that up. So it's funny that people talk about Ben Johnson's scheme like he's like scheming up all these explosive passing type of concepts when everything that he does is based off of kind of like, really messing with the eyes of the linebackers and doing a lot of play action and boots and keepers and kind of like moving that pocket and the launch point and kind of creating that conflict or getting defenders moving. So just understanding the different concepts that we're talking about here. It's not going to be a Ben Johnson install. That's not what's happening. And the passing game part of this is more about flood concepts. And that is more so what KOC is known for. And flood concept is more so scheming up the passing game on all three levels. So that's why when you guys are talking about all these wide receivers and people keep talking to me about Debo, I'm like, no, I do not want Debo. The wide receivers need to have fully developed route trees. The schemer needs to be able to move them around and use them inside and out. Because a lot of times the running game is going to put the linebackers in such conflict that it's going to create voids in these voids behind the linebackers and underneath the kind of like third level in the safety. And that all of that stuff is stuff that's kind of like in between the numbers, right? So, in terms of like you having a preference for a certain wide receiver because you're just trying to plug production, we got to start thinking about like, what do these wide receivers route trees look like and what routes do they run? Because this entire passing game is going to require that wide receivers work certain parts of the field. And that's why when we're talking about who's getting the targets and who's the number two, I still see the slot and the tight end as the two big target getters because of how they're going to create a lot of passing lanes and mismatches against the linebackers in the middle of the field. All right, so let's kind of pull this out a little bit and let's talk a little bit about the RPO run game pros and cons. All right, so let me pop that out a little bit more so you can see it. So I thought this was really important to kind of like put something up here so you guys can kind of see it, because I think we all just know that something was amiss or off with Kingsbury's, scheme, but it's like how like to pinpoint what those things are, right? So I thought I would pull up some pros and cons here so we could look at it. And so it is the one benefit of a Kliff Kingsbury kind of like offense is that it is a nice offense to transition a young quarterback from the college level to the pros. A lot of the concepts are some of the same things that they are running on the college level. Is a easy playbook. It is not a complex playbook at all, right? And so it allows for you not to put too much on the young quarterback's plate while they transition to the NFL. Where it falls off a cliff is that it's such a remedial playbook with not a lot of complexity or not a lot of plays. So there's not a lot of things in terms of like quality of plays. It's kind of the same plays over and over again. You tend to put tendencies on tape with Kliff's scheme, and then everybody comes into the second year and he cannot adjust it. It's just not what he does, right? So understanding that pros is that it's built in right answer. So the RPO is that it reads a conflict defender, so the offense is rarely wrong. So what it is doing is it's working off kind of like leverage concepts, right? And it's a numbers game. And so most of the time, the quarterback is supposed to kind of like read a conflict defender and then make a decision on whether to keep it and run or to throw it. And a lot of that has to do with how the defense is kind of like scheming. So is it a light box versus heavy box? If it's a light box, the quarterback runs. But if they bring those linebackers up, then the quarterback's supposed to hold on to it and then kind of throw it. The problem is that it's not a vertical passing attack. So that's where you kind of it gets tricky. And so the cons is that it's mostly singles. And so I like this analogy when you're thinking about baseball. So it does not allow for a lot of home run, explosive vertical passes, taking the top off type of, pass game. It is a lot of, very quick. It's quick game, basically. And so it's a lot of like screen passes and a lot of little dinking and dunking and things underneath. And so we kind of saw that play out last year. In 2024, when you go back, and I think this is where you saw some of Blough's concepts mixed in, when you start to see Jamison Crowder and OZ utilize more with certain types of routes and the leveraging of certain parts of the field, I'm convinced that was all stuff that was added to the playbook from David Blough, right? And all that stuff, we started to see that stuff pick up in the second half of the season in 2024. So that's where you kind of saw the limitations of Kliff's playbook and other people having to contribute to it to kind of elevate it. The issue in 2025 was you let those receivers go, right? So it was very important for you to kind of keep a Diami. It was important for you to keep a OZ because they were kind of your vertical passing threats. And I think the thought process was that you can let them go because we have Noah Brown and we have Terry. And then they went out and got Debo, who was very much, Debo is good for a quick game, right? Because there's a lot of bubble screens. That's a lot of the things that really, plays to the strengths of Kliff's playbook. But when your vertical threat wide receivers go down in Terry and Noah Brown, and then you're asking your gadget guy to be the wide receiver one, Debo cannot stack corners on the outside. He's not that fast. He does not have the ability. He's never been the type of wide receivers that can play man against corners. He cannot. That's just not who he is. You have to scheme him kind of open. You got to use kind of like gadget plays to get him out in space so that he can function like a running back and get downhill. So we were asking Deebo to kind of go a little bit beyond his skill set last year, and we saw that play out. So where people are criticizing Jayden for holding on to the ball for too long, Jayden didn't have the answers down the field, right? And everybody had Kliff's playbook, so they made the adjustment, and it was a lot of, bracketing of Zach Ertz. So Zach Ertz was, being double teamed. So Jayden really needed the schemer to have the answers or to have the counter punch to, the defense is having his playbook and the tendencies there, and he just couldn't do it. So a lot of last year was, again, Jayden doing his best to elevate Kliff's playbook. And this year he got injured, right? Because, everybody was not going to allow him to use his legs to beat them. And so as I stated, the whole point of this RPO quick game is to get the ball out fast. So it helps to beat the blitz and it masks a shaky line. So, not saying I always wonder why they let the offensive line coach go. And then you start to listen to some of the offensive linemen talk about just them not being able to communicate or be prepared from a communication standpoint. So it just sounds like the offensive linemen were doing the best they could in the moment, but they were not necessarily like prepared from a detail-oriented standpoint, game in and game out. The other aspect of it is that it is tempo friendly. So it pairs with the no huddle to freeze the defensive subs. So it's supposed to kind of like wear the defense down with the up tempo. And I think, once defenses figure out that's what you're doing, they kind of find ways to slow that down and they found the counter for that in 2025. And I'm not saying the no huddle or the tempo is going to go away. That needs to be a wrinkle and not the feature of the offense, right? So when you are, and that goes both ways. So the inability for the defense to communicate and for them to do the things they need to do, that means the offense can't communicate and make adjustments at the line of scrimmage and stuff like that. So, it not only stresses defenses out, it was stressing our offensive linemen out. The offensive linemen hated the no huddle, right? So they like that they'll be able to kind of huddle up and talk about the things they're seeing and communicate with one another to kind of like get those protections kind of dialed in and stuff like that. It punishes both boxes. So I did kind of like discuss this a little bit in that it's basically, for lighter boxes, it punishes the lighter boxes. So basically, you give to the running back in the lighter boxes, and then in a loaded box, you kind of pull it or you throw it. So the entire point of this is to leverage the dynamic quarterback. And so the reason why Kliff is always looking for a dual threat quarterback, because it allows for him to use that quarterback as an additional runner. So the defense has to account for not only the running back, but also the quarterback. So it creates the mismatches with the linebackers or whoever's the spy or things like that. So it's either going to allow for the running back to pop, so if you hand it off, because they're accounting for the quarterback as the runner, so then you hand it off to the running back, and then the running back can kind of gash you a little bit. And we kind of see that with the combination of Saquon and Jalen Hurts, right? That's how they kill people, because you have to account for both the quarterback and the running back in the run game. And then it's a very simple playbook. So you get a high rep concept. So it spreads the field to create grass. So it's kind of spreads the field horizontally, but not vertically. So that's why you see a lot of screens and things outside the numbers. And you kind of heard Terry talk about Kliff's scheme being very kind of like vertical, kind of outside the numbers type of vertical concepts for passing, but not necessarily leveraging other parts of the field vertically. And that's in between the numbers and things like that. So some of the cons, and we did talk about limiting explosives. And so when it looked like just the offense was stagnant, and when everybody talks about the fact that Jayden did not have close to like 5,000 yards thrown and things like that. That is by design. Like Kliff's scheme is not built to get the quarterback off from an explosive passing game standpoint. It also caps the route depth. So the linemen have downfield rules. And when I was doing research and I saw this, I was like, dang, we used to get called for illegal linemen downfield all the time. That used to drive me nuts. And I was like, why does that keep happening? And that was just how the scheme worked. I know the linemen hated it. So it largely caps the route depth. So you have to do a very quick screen game. There's no physical identity, and we know that. Like there was no power game associated with this type of scheme. So there's little clock control, and you can kind of get predictable after a while, which we did, because you can't leverage like getting those like third and shorts and things. It was just hard. We did not have a power run game to execute and get that. And then I think the biggest thing is that it adds quarterback hits. So our RPO keepers are an injury risk for a franchise quarterback. Like treating Jayden like he's just like out there playing hero ball. Yes, he is, but that's the scheme, right? That is what the scheme asked of him. So we can't get mad at the quarterback for doing what the scheme asked him to do. And then squeeze when tight. So it is a spread type of concept. It's spread offense. And so when the space disappears, when you get into red zone and short yardage situations, it actually allows the defenders to kind of squeeze you offensively. So there's not a lot of grass to work with. And so that's when you need kind of like those one-on-one kind of like hooper type of wide receivers that can catch through contact and that can kind of like out. You need that. You kind of need a like AJ Brown type of wide receiver in those situations. So this is kind of the RPO run game and kind of the pros and cons to kind of help us set up kind of the rest of the video. So let's actually talk about the run concepts to watch for in the new scheme under David Blough. So zone is going to be the base of this scheme. The zone run is going to be the base. So wide/inside zone is the natural fit. So it's going to marry cleanly to the under center play action that the whole scheme shift is built around, So then the under center play action in bootleg or boot. So the payoff is that we're going to sell the run off heavier looks, which is going to free Jayden on bootlegs and movement throws. So his single best trait. So this is where we talk about we are never going to take the thing away from Jayden that makes him special. And that's the fact that he is a dual threat quarterback. It is just how you leverage his legs. And so instead of him leaking out from behind his protection, serving as the kind of running back, it is more so using his legs to move the launch point, to move the pocket, to do things to kind of like make defenders on all levels have to kind of like get into motion and shift. So he's no longer kind of like a lame duck sitting back there where they can just keep their eyes on the quarterback and just, them moving the pocket around in the launch point, them having that run game married into the pass game means that linebackers and safeties and everybody on the second and third level now has to account for the wide receivers and the running backs because they can't just sit there now and just tee off on the quarterback and watch the quarterback when they go under center and they kind of like obscure that mesh point with the play action and things like that. It gets those linebackers kind of moving and shifting. It plays with their eyes. So now you're putting multiple defenders on all levels into conflict with this style of play. We are going to see heavier multi-tight end personnel sets. So the multiple tight end sets did show up at minicamp. We heard people talk about this. we heard people talk about Ben Sinnott. It's like, wow, Ben Sinnott is out there. Chig, Bates, so we are going to see a lot of tight end action this year. So bigger groupings sell the run and disguise the pass out of the same shell, right? He said it so many times, make the same things look different. And the way you make the same things look different is playing around with the personnel groupings, right? And how you utilize the personnel in that grouping. So in one personnel grouping, because of the hybrid nature of Ben Sinnott, he can be the leading blocker on a power run with Kaytron, right? Or that same type of setup, he can also leak out as the pass catching tight end because he is not only a fullback, he's a tight end. So everybody that keeps trying to throw Ben Sinnott away, I need y'all to give him a chance in this new scheme because this fits his traits better and what the coordinator wants to do. And so they are going to retain quarterback run and RPO wrinkles. So Blough is keeping things I really like from the old system. So Jayden's legs stay a constraint, but just dial back from the Kingsbury volume. So keeping in mind that the philosophy for Kingsbury is that the quarterback reads to his legs. Ultimately, the quarterback run is a part of the design, right? Whereas this time, the quarterback run is going to be a wrinkled use. So it's going to be a specialized play leveraged in certain situations and not all the time. All right. So let's talk about Bill Croskey-Merritt. So what we know is that, and this is where we're going to, through this exercise, ask some questions. Who's the lead back? Who's the running back one? I've seen a lot of talk about this online. I've seen people put out their videos about Rachaad White versus Bill. And so let's see how all of these backs are going to be utilized. Let's get into it. So here's kind of the role in David Blough's run game. So he is the early down engine. So Bill enters camp with real momentum after a productive rookie year. So for people who I have people telling me they think Bill's going to get cut. And who cuts a running back that had 800 rushing yards as a rookie? It's a 7th-round draft pick. I don't understand where these takes come from. Y'all decide that y'all don't like individual players and you just ignore their production, right? There's no GM in this entire league that is going to cut a 7th-round draft pick that gave you 800 yards. Do you not understand the production you are getting for that salary and the return on that investment? He is super cheap. And you have him under contract for like 4 or 5 years on a rookie deal. We have to stop saying things because we think it sounds good. Like now that we've added all of these running backs in the room that we perceive to be better than Bill, we can cut him. No, because objectively speaking, no other running back that we have signed had this level of production. Bill's production, when you compare to what Rachaad White did, Bill's production, when you compare to what Jerome Ford did last year, he had more yards. And all of these running backs were not the lead back. So he's showing you that his explosiveness, when you compare his explosiveness to the amount of touches that he requires to give you that level of productivity, Bill does not need to touch the ball that much to give you productivity. That is an efficient running back. So I can't. That has been the conversation that has kind of pissed me off the most, because I cannot have we got to slow down and just stop saying things because we think it makes sense, right? Let's be for real. They signed all these other running backs because Bill was the only running back under contract on the roster. Not because they were looking to get rid of him. He was the only. We had a running back room of 1, and that was Bill. So they had to go back and sign other running backs. That's why they added these guys to the room. All these guys still need to fight to dethrone Bill. So that's my take on Bill. And I've seen all these conversations. I'm just telling you. When it comes to Bill's power and his violent cuts, there's no other running back in the room that gives you that. So, he gives you about 4.6 yards per carry, and he did this in a scheme that effectively did not execute very well on the blocking style required for his run style. So this is just Bill getting it out the mud. And so he profiles as the downhill one-cut runner, and this is a requirement of a zone-based under-center attack. And this is how they want to run it on 1st and 2nd down. So these are zone runs on 1st and 2nd down, and then kind of in the short yardage situations, you kind of do it in between tackles, downhill power type of, running. So he isn't currently part of the passing game, and this is where Bill has to get better because this makes him one-dimensional, and it contradicts what Blough wants to do in terms of the versatility he wants in all of these people. If you put Bill out there right now, it very clearly is a run. He's not a threat to catch the ball, and so you cannot make the same things look different with Bill because you can't scheme out a wheel route or passing kind of play out of the zone with him, right? So I think that's why Rachaad White is in this conversation as a lead back. But then we're going to make a case for why hold on there, because we're talking about it requires a one-cut runner that's not what Rachaad White does. So both of these guys have limitations that the other one accounts for. So Bill's not strong in the pass game. Rachaad White is. Zone requires a very aggressive one-cut runner. Bill does that better than Rachaad. So you can't automatically elevate Rachaad up to running back one just because you think he's a better pass catcher than Bill. Because at the end of the day, I do not think that when it comes to the explosiveness out of the zone run, I don't think Rachaad gives you that. And we have to go back to the run game. This is built off the run game first, in the pass game second. So a lot of his snaps are going to be concentrated on early down rushing volume that sets up the play action. And yes, he is still the front runner for the starting job. I still have Bill. It's Bill's job to lose, y'all. Y'all done gave this job. Some of y'all done gave the job to Rachaad White, and I don't know how y'all doing that out of OTAs. Them boys ain't put pads on yet. So, the running backs look different when you put them pads on them. And when it's time to really kind of get in the trenches and having that vision and the ability to keep their feet moving and to see the block, they have not done any of that yet. And we have already given the job to someone else. Y'all gotta wait for these boys to put pads on before y'all can. You can't make that call out of freaking OTAs. I'm sorry. So people are just right now, you have a preference based on who you like and don't like. And so let's wait until these guys put pads on. So let's actually talk a little bit about what outside zone is here with Bill. And so outside zone is going to be primarily ran out of a 12 personnel kind of look. So on outside zone, the lineman block an area and a landmark rather than a specific defender. So everyone is going to take a coordinated play side step and work in combination up to the second level. So in the outside zone look or in the zone look, the running back's job is simple to describe and hard to master. So they have to basically press the track toward the edge and read the first down lineman's block and make one decisive cut upfield if the edge is sealed, back across the grain if the front over pursues. And this is why I'm telling y'all to hold off on the Rachaad White talk, because this requires a very violent one cut type of runner. And quite frankly, Bill is the only one in the room that gives you that. So, this is going to be, and when we say 12 personnel, we're talking about one running back, 2 tight ends, and 2 wide receivers, right? So for everybody who is just caught up on this wide receiver room, if we're talking about more 12 personnel and 13 personnel groupings, it's less wide receivers on the field. So we need to be paying attention to actually slots and tight ends, just based on the groupings. Everybody's talking about this wide receiver room, we're going to be out there in 11 personnel, all the time. And that's just not the case. So it's a single back under center with 2 tight ends to add gap integrity and to seal the run. So the whole line zone steps, play side in unison, and then Bill is going to press the edge and read one cut. So you need someone with good vision and you need a violent cutter. That's Bill. So this is the base run the entire play action game is built off of. So if 12 personnel is the base, you have an X, Z, and you primarily are going to have an X and a Z out there. So yeah, we got to be careful about these personnel groups when we start talking about this wide receiver room. And so I understand why some people, when they understand this, go, I would rather have an Ayuk, right? Because if you have a Terry at the X and then you have a Z, Ayuk at a Z, that means you get to the mere route trees of these guys, you know. And then that's on like do not sleep on Antonio Williams. And this is why they like him so much because of the inside out versatility. You guys keep penciling him in as a slot receiver. And I don't think that he's always going to be lined up in the slot. I think sometimes he's going to be on the outside. So you have to look at these guys kind of like, you know, I'm with everyone who's like, we need an Ayuk or a Diggs. But I don't like some of y'all's arguments, if I'm being honest. So like, that's just me, right? So let's, you know, why Bill? Why him? Because his downhill one cut style is exactly what a zone first early down role asks for, right? You know, his projected production in 12 personnel as kind of like the zone runner is 55%. And so based on just his productivity last year of 4.7 yards per carry, this is a 46% success rate. And so when they say a success rate, it's the ability, the success rate is just based on him getting positive yardage out of the run, right? And so he has close to they project that he will have a 46% success rate and then 11% explosive rate as the outside zone runner, right? You know, so again, looking at, you know, Rachaad White in a 12 personnel as the outside zone runner, maybe 28%. And we know that Kaytron Allen is here to be the power back. So we don't expect to see him in a lot of like outside zone looks. Okay, so let's get into Rachaad White. Right. So this is the third down weapon, and this is kind of how I saw him when we picked him up. They kind of told me that, you know, he is kind of a good, kind of like the Austin Eckler. I think I've heard over on Bleeding BNG, Jalen kind of comped him to Eckler, but with more of like he has way more extended route running prowess. So Eckler was more of kind of like an underneath dump off, and then he got into open space and made you kind of like miss, right? That's not what Rachaad does. Rachaad can legitimately run wide receiver routes. So keep that in mind here. He has 205 career receptions, 1,450 career receiving yards, and 2,656 career rushing yards. I cannot believe that we got him for the price we got. That daggone power of friendship. We're not going to sit here and act like there probably wasn't a healthy market for Rachaad White and what he can do in the passing game and just what a lot of modern offenses are looking for. They're looking for these type of running backs that can kind of like line up as receivers because they're trying to get that mismatch with the linebackers and like, you know, so let's not act like Rachaad White didn't choose to come here because he wanted to be here. He had options. When he said he had options, he's not like a scrub. Like I can see there being a market for him. So I think he took a significant pay cut to come here because he believes that much in our quarterback, that power of friendship, and then he believes in what we're doing over here. So it's interesting that he chose to come here. But I think this offense is going to lean very much into like blowing up his production. So he has an opportunity to like earn more money, you know. The passing down compliment. So this is going to be his role. White is a proven 3-down back and reliable receiver out of the backfield, right? So 50 catches in 2025, 2025 and 64 in 2024. So this lets Blough keep the same personnel on the field across downs and disguise run versus pass. So this is the versatility I'm talking about when he's saying, I want to make the same things look different. I want the defense to see the same personnel grouping, but be very confused on whether we're running it or passing it. So this is why it's very important that for Bill to stay out on that field and not get beat out for snap share by Rachaad, he has to serve as an effective receiver in the passing game. He just has to. He's a dead giveaway for what you're trying to do in the play if he does not demonstrate that he can catch the ball. It is very important. So he is the early favorite for the primary third down role. And he carries enough rushing pedigree at 14 career rushing touchdowns to push for the starting gig outright. So that's why I said, the fact that we have people that see this as a running back competition between Bill and Rachaad, I think that's fair. And I think it's fair because, Rachaad has demonstrated he can serve as a running back and get you yards as a running back. Is he the style of runner that can get you as much explosion out of the outside zone that you're looking for? I'm not sure he is. He can get you production, but not to the level that Bill can. But with that being said, he is an elite pass catching running back and an elite blocker. Two things that Bill just needs to work himself up to. So this is very much a competition. I'm not saying it's not a competition. I'm just saying that those of you that have crowned Rachaad White as running back one, and we have not even put pads on, it's just very interesting because we need to see what he can do in those violent cuts when you have actual defenders and pads barreling down on you, and you just don't, you're not getting it in OTAs, right? We saw a very good running back in Brian Robinson struggle with this. He's supposed to be a power back, but he couldn't. He had poor vision. He would stop his feet. He couldn't make those violent cuts, right? And so, he was a basically north-south runner, right? And so I think Rachaad's going to have to show us that because we've seen what Bill can do as a, one cut runner. So that's just, I think we need to go into training camp with this being very much still a battle for running back one. Well up into the season opener, but I don't think you can crown anyone coming out of OTAs, right? All right, so what does this look like in kind of like the scheme? So the play action wheel, right? So this is kind of what they were cooking our linebackers with all last year. We know. We finally have an opportunity to do this to other teams here. So yay that we're finally here. But I think we all know what this is. This was Bobby all last year. It's that home, this play action wheel play right here where they're getting a mismatch on that linebacker. So this is usually run out of 11 personnel look. So one running back, one tight end, and 3 wide receivers. And it can be done out of a shotgun look. So this is kind of where we're saying that there is some of these plays because, it's not going to always be under center. So it's the same 11 personnel look as the base offense. So it's going to disguise a little bit. And so you kind of see the Z, the X. You've got kind of a tight end out there, and then you have the slot. And so this is kind of a heavy pass look. This is kind of a look that even though it's showing 3 wide receivers, this can give you kind of a 4 wide receiver look because of Rachaad White's elite pass catching ability. So that puts all types of conflict on the second and third level in terms of who is matching up with who. And most of the times you are going to get a mismatch where a linebacker is on someone that they shouldn't be on. And in this case, the fact that he can run routes like a wide receiver is going to put a lot of stress on the linebacker group. So the play action fake is going to hold the linebackers, and it's going to allow for White to slip out late on the wheel route, right? So this is why it's very important that you still have that dual action, a dual threat quarterback, because you're going to always need someone to account for Jayden. So it becomes a numbers game. So if you have a spy on Jayden, that's one linebacker, and then there's you got to account for the other three wide receivers out there, and then you got to account for the tight end. So it just leaves an ISO kind of like one-on-one situation with Rachaad and a less athletic player on top of that, So that's basically all people were doing to us last year with Bobby. It creates the running back on linebacker mismatch up the sideline, which is his calling card for Rachaad. So this is how we can foresee Rachaad being utilized, right? But it's got to look like he's a threat to run the ball. So they're still going to have to leverage him as a runner, even though he's there to be a pass catching running back. They've got to find opportunities to leverage him as a runner. So I do think on kind of like first and second down and early downs, you're going to see a lot of like shuffling between Bill and Rachaad, because Rachaad does have to demonstrate that he's a runner so that he can sell the look. So why Rachaad for this look? He's a trusted receiver out of the backfield that keeps the offense multiple on passing down. So, it allows you to dictate, right, to the defense and not kind of let the defense dictate to you, right? So you got multiple options on this out of this look in terms of the play you can call, which is not something you can ever execute on with a Kliff Kingsbury scheme, is because the play is the play. It's one look. None of the passing and run game was not married. So if it was a run play for Bill, it's a run play for Bill. That there's no passing look out of it outside of a Jayden, you tuck it and you run, right? So that's kind of where understanding why it was so important for us to move on from Kliff Kingsbury's scheme. So the projected production for Rachaad in this type of personnel grouping is 9.8 yards per attempt at a 58% completion rate and a 22% explosion rate. And that makes sense because he's getting a mismatch on the linebacker. So this is a very yak-based offense we got going on here. So once guys get the ball in their hands, they're going to be able to make plays after the catch, right? So depending on this look, and they included Terry McLaurin in this look because it's a passing type of play. They didn't even include, when I modeled this and mocked it up, they didn't include Bill because Bill right now has not served in this play historically to give data. Now, if you switch this out, you can kind of like, there would have been some comps in here for Bill in what he could have given you, but we don't have any data there. So for right now, this is Rachaad White's personnel package. This is all him. And so the projected target share is 42%. And then them kind of utilizing Terry in motion and getting this play with Terry, utilizing him in motion. So the play action wheel route is kind of how they want to use Rachaad White. And finally, we have kind of like our version of what everyone else has been killing us with for years, with these kind of like pass catching running backs on our linebackers like Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson. All right. So let's talk a little bit here about Kaytron Allen. So he is our power back. He's the rookie. So he is the biggest running back on the roster. We are playing power football, y'all. I'm so excited. Like we about to play some big boy football here soon with what we're doing. We finally get back to some old school football. I'm tired of the gimmicky stuff here. So at Penn State, he has the career rushing yard record at 4,180 yards over his entire career, at 6.2 yards a carry, which I don't think y'all understand. That's a lot of yards per carry for what is supposed to be a power back. Like these supposed to be hard yards. Like, so that's, he can kind of get busy too. And 39 career rushing touchdowns. So he will be the short yardage hammer in Blough's run game. He's Penn State's all-time leading rusher and the roster's biggest back. So Allen is a power runner with genuine scheme versatility. He can win in gap or zone, right? So again, y'all keep wanting Jerome Ford and other people to be like, no, it is going to be Bill. It's going to be Bill, Rachaad, and Kaytron. We don't even have to sit here and try to keep making these things complicated, y'all. Kaytron and Bill are on rookie deals. It is just good roster management and GMing to prioritize the rookies you drafted higher in the scheme. Because I'm seeing everybody want Jerome Ford to make this team. I'm like, I don't see it. But if y'all see it, good for y'all. So he can win in gap or zone with the patience. He has incredible contact balance and a short area burst to project as the goal line short yardage specialist. So think David Montgomery. This is how, the Detroit Lions used David Montgomery. He was a red zone monster. Like, he got most of his touchdowns just working out of short yardage red zone situations, right? So the room is crowded, but this staff rewards competition over draft slot. So, Bill Croskey-Merritt a year ago. So a strong camp could force him into the rotation sooner than a 6th rounder usually earns it. Like, I don't care that he was a late. Bill was the last pick in the draft, and they traded Brian Robinson when they saw what he was doing in camp. They got rid of Brian Robinson because we got Bill, right? So again, for the folks that keep wanting don't forget about Jerome Ford. I want to see Kaytron Allen in pads. Like, this is a real deal running back. This is a big boy running back, right? And so I just don't see any of the other guys just like taking this last little third. I don't see Jeremy McNichols taking it from him, and I don't see Jerome Ford taking him from him. So I have him as like the third running back in the room, based on that and how they want to utilize him. So let's take a look at his scheme and see how he's utilized, right? And so the power gap scheme. So 21 and 22 personnel. So very heavy goal line, short yardage situations, where, as you can see from this diagram, you kind of you see the fullback there, right? So you have the quarterback. This is an I formation, basically, y'all. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, we back to power football, right? I ain't seen an I formation in a long time. But y'all see that FB right there? That is one been Senate, folks. So when did you ever see this formation in Kliff's scheme, for everybody who wanted to argue with me about Ben Sinnott and why Bates is the better block? When did we ever see this? Rarely, right? So there are some personnel groupings, 13 personnel, 21. There are some personnel groupings that fit Ben Sinnott very well here, right? And so the fact that we picked up this power back in the draft should let y'all know we finna be playing bully ball out there. Okay? So the backside guard is going to pull, and the fullback kicks out the edge defender, right? And so this is one of those things where you need a lead, you need a lead blocker. So for everyone who doesn't, and I'm going to do a different video, but if you don't understand the difference between an inline blocker and a move blocker, it requires a certain level of athleticism that Ben Sinnott has. He's one of the better move blockers in the room. So the like I said, the backside guard pulls and the fullback kicks out on the edge defender. On the play side line, and the tight end down block to seal a double team at the point of attack. So this is going to be a lot of heavy personnel. This is not one of those things where it's going to be a lot of wide receivers on the field doing this play. That's why it is more short yardage, right? So the reason why you need this, and the reason why we just really struggled in kind of like those red zone situations, because the spread offense from a passing standpoint just doesn't, the way the spread offense works, once you eliminate grass, it renders the amount of things you can run out of it kind of like the playbook shrinks, so to speak, right? The outside zone running scheme struggles in short yardage and at the goal line where there's no extra puller or double team angle and the box is loaded, right? So this is why when you saw Detroit, they had Jahmyr Gibbs, and then they primarily utilized. And this is again, I'm going back to the conversation I had about Ben Johnson understanding run block concepts and scheming up the run game. He does this very well, and that's why he always had a two-headed attack. And he keeps kind of like a power runner and an outside zone runner. If you go look at what he's doing over with the Bears, he's doing the same thing again with Swift and Monangai. Okay, so this is kind of his kind of like footprint, so to speak, or this is where the influence from Ben Johnson is coming in. It's all the run game. And that's why he went out and got a third tight end, right? Because he wants in these type of like personnel groupings, he needs more pass catching tight ends, right? So you need to be able to go heavy and get the tight ends out there for blocking purposes, but you also need to be dynamic enough where you got pass catchers out there. And in a lot of the personnel groupings, you can't put wide receivers out there. So what do? You get a bunch of pass catching tight ends. You get tight ends that can serve as a threat in the pass game. So I need everybody to kind of immerse themselves in modern day schemes here and how everything is shifting towards multiple tight end looks here. And that's why you saw in the draft, those wide receivers started to go a little later. They went, because there was a run on tight ends in the second round. So we are seeing in real time this kind of shift in the league to kind of like multiple tight end sets, 2 to 3 tight end looks, right? People are no longer just strictly running their offenses out of 11 personnel look and a whole bunch of wide receivers. That's just not happening much anymore. So a heavy gap scheme package is the answer to the 3rd and 1s that stalled the offense. And that's where a runner like Kaytron Allen, the biggest back on the roster, and a scheme versatile power runner is built for exactly that role. So he can't kind of bounce it outside on you. I think he does it well on one side versus the other. I think on tape, like, he's better downhill. He can do some outside zone, but I think like where he's most productive is kind of limited. But yeah, this is where the power game is going to come in on short yard and red zone situations. And so this is what the production looks like here, at 4.4 yards per carry at a 51% success rate. That is a high success rate, in terms of executing on getting the down and distance or getting positive yardage, right? So we are expected to see Kaytron at 45% of these looks or get the projected snap share there. And then with Croskey-Merritt, kind of like in 35% in kind of the backup role towards him as the power runner. And I can't believe it because we've all seen how Bill looks. Bill has been in that weight room. Bill is big. Like he put on a lot of muscle. He looks like he's ready for the physicality, right? So, and then again, Rachaad White is a smaller, shiftier back. We're not anticipating him being utilized in the power run or the power gap scheme here. So, let's take a look at, and pull back and compare the two systems here, right? And so system A is the zone under center play action, and system B is the RPO run air raid pass, right? So the dimension, let's look at the different dimensions in the offense. So explosive ceiling, and when we say explosive ceiling, we're talking about kind of like getting more explosives in the pass game, right? And so under center zone play action gives you a higher explosive ceiling off of the play action shots and the boots off a belief fake. And so that is it's very important that we have a run first identity. We have to sell the run. They have to believe that we are running this ball for us to get the explosives downfield. And the RPO run air raid pass, it was very moderate because the scheme is all about spacing concepts and getting yak. So it's about getting the ball in like a Zach Ertz hand and then them running after the catch. It's about the screen bubble passes. So that's why they went out and got a Debo, because it's about getting the ball in Debo's hand and then Debo getting downhill like a runner to getting the yards after the catch, right? So you were never going to get those very explosive down the field kind of like plays. And I'm telling you, in 2024, the plays that we saw down field, I feel like that was David Blough's influence there on the playbook. So the week to week floor, so it builds as line timing sets in. So zone really requires chemistry with the offensive line group. I think this offensive line group has been working together for so long that shouldn't be a problem. I think that is why you're going to kind of see Allegretti out there over the rookie, because it does require someone who's been kind of like, it requires the chemistry amongst the offensive line. I would love to see the left guard spot get solidified and we just decide that it's going to be Brandon Coleman. If it's going to be Brandon Coleman, leave Brandon Coleman in there. There's been a lot of like swinging of different personnel, different roles last year. And I think, that doesn't allow for people to really settle in and kind of master where they play. So I look forward to Brandon Coleman solidifying the left guard position. So it's very high in the RPO. So it's very quarterback friendly, quick game consistency. So it's about just really getting that ball out, it's very tempo. That's what it is. In the zone under center, quarterback hit exposure is lower. So there are fewer designed quarterback runs. That does not mean that Jayden is not going to use his feet. It just means that he's not going to use his feet as the runner. So he's not going to be a running back. He's going to use his feet to kind of move the pocket, move the launch point, kind of like bootleg, roll out, things like that. So he's still very much, and he still is going to have to be respected as a runner, because you need the linebackers to still account for him as a runner. So you still want to create that conflict on that second level where someone always has to account for him, right? So it creates those mismatches in those spaces in kind of like the grass to create passing lanes ultimately, So in the RPO system, there's a lot of RPO keepers, which creates a lot of quarterback run risk. And we saw that play out last year. And that's why Jayden stayed injured. And so the install learning curve, this probably goes back to, I asked the question on Twitter, was this a matter of Kliff being too lazy to sit down and really wrap his head around installing this type of offense? Or is it simply that Kliff can't do it and he doesn't have the acumen to do it? So it's a very longer, so under center footwork and play action timing, that is the quarterback. It takes some time for the quarterback to really get that under control. I remember when Caleb, it was not going well for Caleb in the OTAs and in preseason. We were early on ESPN, they were talking about how this may not be a good pairing with Ben Johnson, and he won't be able to do the things that Ben Johnson needs him to do. But we saw that the more Caleb played in the system, he was comfortable. We are coming out of OTAs hearing that Jayden is extremely comfortable. He looks good. He looks like he's been running this offense for for a significant amount of time. So he does not look like a rookie in the new scheme, right? Which is going to bode well for us when they put pads on. So the fact that he has these kind of like basic fundamental things under control, it's just going to bode well for him when we finally put the pads on and he has to go up against defense, right? And so again, reason why this playbook is very good for rookie quarterbacks, because it's very simple. There's not a lot of heavily rep concepts. It's not a complex playbook. It's some of the passing concepts are kind of like limited. So it's the same stuff over and over again, which also means that it just does not stress defenses, because they are seeing the same things over and over again. So they eventually get a handle on what you're doing and they're able to counter, So then the short yardage and red zone. So we're going to get stronger kind of like play there, because of the gap power and condensed play action, whereas in the RPO system it's weaker. The spacing disappears in tight quarters. So it allows for a lot of heavy boxes when you start to get in short down situations, which kind of like kind of cuts off that run game. And so tempo no huddle limited. So we're going to use tempo no huddle in the Blough scheme as a wrinkle, right? It will no longer be a feature. They're not going to completely get away from it. It's going to be used situationally like it should be. And then in the RPO system, it is a feature of the offense. It is the core weapon, right? So, and there, we already discussed the downsides to that and the lack of communication that can happen with the quarterback, with the offensive line, them being able to assign protections and things like that. So I do think that it's going to bode a little bit well for our quarterback's ability to slow things down, kind of take a beat in what he's looking at, to be able to counter things and to make those adjustments at the line of scrimmage. Weather resilience. So having a run first identity, just it just scales to a lot of different when it starts to get cold, when it's rainy, when it's, you know, yeah, it's just, you know, I power football for me. I just love it. Like, it does not matter what's going on out there. Just hand that ball off and run it if all else fails. I think with the RPO system, it's like, again, it's quick passing game. It's very much conducive to the elements you have available to you. And we don't necessarily play in like the NFC North or anything. But you know, there are times when it's windy out there, or it's raining. We do have to play in areas sometimes where you have that kind of weather. So I'm a purist. I'm gonna always be an advocate of kind of like run first football. And then the offensive line profile, I think the David Blough scheme fits better to our offensive line archetypes. We have a bunch of athletic offensive linemen that probably work better in zone blocking than as opposed to just sitting there having to anchor down and hold up blocks and pass protection. So those quick combo blocks and more kind of like having to hold up from a strength standpoint, where a lot of us are not. We feel like our interior linemen are kind of like smaller and not comfortable with the interior linemen in the past. And so we wanted more beefier interior line play. I think the zone blocking scheme just pairs much better to kind of like a Brandon Coleman type, and kind of like what we do on the outside with the tackles and stuff like that. The primary stress on the defense is basically gap integrity plus boot play action conflict. So it is very much just messing with the linebackers' eyes and freezing the linebackers. And, you know, when you pair that with a quarterback that is a threat to run it, they still have to account for him. So it's just going to help create passing lanes. It's going to create voids in the zone behind the linebackers because they're going to have to step up, right? And then it's going to create all this space for those wide receivers like an Antonio Williams, like a Terry, to kind of like, and even a Chig, to get all of those routes that you run kind of like inside the numbers and things like that. And then with the RPO, it's more of a numbers leverage plus tempo. So it is very much a very one-on-one kind of ISO. When you can't win on the leverage and you can't find that conflict defender, it just allows for the kind of like corners just to kind of man up on all your receivers. And that's where you guys are seeing in a Kliff scheme, you need a higher level of talent throughout the wide receiver room, because the scheme doesn't really scheme the receivers open, right? It's predicated on really getting that conflict defender, getting those kind of quick shots out to beat the blitz, kind of like really using kind of Jayden as the one-on-one weapon to kind of like keep it and then go one-on-one, right? So it was never going to be the type of offense that showcased our wide receivers. I'm sorry. And then the last piece of this, which is the most important piece, is that how does it leverage Jayden Daniels as a dual threat quarterback? It leverages movement in the pocket, moving the launch point, and things like that. But it keeps him in the pocket and behind his blockers to protect him, as opposed to maximizing his legs as a running back, which again, we already saw what happened there. We don't have to keep discussing that. But I definitely felt like I hear a lot of people calling our quarterback injury prone. I hear people saying he lacks like pocket presence. I hear that he just is he's a scrambler and things like that. No, bro, that is what the scheme asked of him. It is literally what the scheme asked of him, right? So, let's kind of like close this out, right? So we have one backfield with three rows. We have kind of like, Croskey-Merritt as the early down engine. So he gives you the downhill volume that sets up the play action. We have Rachaad White, which is your passing down kind of threat. So, he allows you to keep personnel on the field, which will allow you to disguise the play as run versus pass. And then we have Kaytron Allen, that is the short yardage power kind of like back, which is going to give you kind of the goal line hammer in the scheme versatile changeup, right? So what we need to look for as we kind of get into training camp and preseason when they put the pads on, because that's where what is really going to tell us how these roles are going to shake out and who's going to emerge as kind of the lead back, first down back, second down back, is they got to put the pads on, right? So whether whether White becomes primarily a niche player as a receiver, or whether he's able to kind of like fight Bill for kind of like those early down snaps as a outside zone runner. And then can Kaytron Allen just be more than a short yardage back, right? And I think the answer for me is that the more that all three of these guys can do, the more dynamic it makes the run game, right? Because it's going to you can run any one of them out there, and you can't peg a tendency in the play calling of that back does this particular thing, so this is the play call. So for me, the best case scenario is that all these guys can demonstrate to be effective pass catchers, right? All of them can demonstrate to be effective outside zone runners, and all of them can demonstrate to be really good blocking running backs. So the more the merrier. But I do think we need to move away from this notion of a workhorse back. These modern types of schemes don't do that anymore. They leverage multiple running backs, right? So just look at what everyone else is doing. But I do want to close this out by asking a question. Like, do you think that Bill is going to emerge from this as the running back one, or is it going to be kind of like determined by what is needed in the game flow and the game plan for on a game by game basis, right? Because all of these running backs give you different things. In the end, each game may call for something different. But I'm very curious to know where a lot of people stand on this. It just seems like people are still looking for that running back one candidate. And so I just want to know, after this presentation, have you guys changed your thoughts on that? Or are you still squarely there and looking for the lead back in the room? So until next time, I will see you, and hopefully you stay tuned. I will be getting into the tight end room in the next video. So bye.